We remember the razor-sharp cheekbones of Edward Scissorhands and the drunken swagger of Jack Sparrow. Johnny Depp was Hollywood's ultimate chameleon, hiding behind masks while we fell for his chaos. At 62, Johnny Depp is finally revealing his true self. He admits the truth. Before the world broke him, one woman owned his soul. She was the love he never recovered from. It began in the summer of 1989 at the premiere of Great Balls of Fire. New York City pulsed with flashbulbs and anticipation. Johnny, 26, already carried the dangerous allure of 21 Jump Street. Long dark hair, cigarette perpetually dangling, that half smirk that promised trouble and poetry in equal measure. Winona Ryder, 17, had just stepped out of Beetlejuice with those enormous dark eyes and a quiet intensity that made directors believe she could carry entire worlds on her narrow shoulders. Their managers made the introduction in the crowded lobby, casual, almost accidental. One sentence passed between them, one shared laugh, and the rest of the room simply ceased to exist. He would later describe it as though the film reel of his life had slowed to half speed, every sound muffled, every face blurred, only her in sharp, aching focus. She felt the same electric pull, though she was too young, too new to fame to name it yet. Within weeks, they were sharing an apartment in Los Angeles. He carried her photo in his wallet like a talisman. She borrowed his leather jackets for auditions and slept in his t-shirts. They were impossibly young, impossibly in love. The kind of reckless devotion that makes you believe forever is not a hope, but a guarantee already written in the stars. He walked into a tattoo parlor without warning and sat down. "Winona Forever," he told the artist. No hesitation, no second thought. The needles sang her name into his skin while she waited outside, heart pounding. When he showed her the fresh ink, she cried, happy, overwhelmed tears that tasted like victory. They spoke of children they would have one day, of a cabin in Montana where the world couldn't reach them, of a life built on quiet nights and shared secrets. They spoke of forever, the way only the very young can, certain it would arrive on schedule. The engagement followed swiftly. He found a vintage ring in a dusty New Orleans antique shop. Simple diamond, Art Deco band, exactly her taste. One quiet dinner, one slipped-on ring, one whispered promise that no one else would ever touch what they had. They dreamed of a small wedding, perhaps in the mountains, perhaps with only a handful of friends. No circus, no spectacle, just them. But forever is a fragile word when the spotlight is already burning. Tim Burton cast them together in Edward Scissorhands. Johnny became the gentle, tragic figure with scissors for hands. Winona, the girl who saw past the blades to the tender heart beneath. On the Florida set, they were inseparable. Crew members still speak of it in hushed tones, how Johnny's entire presence softened the moment she entered the frame, and how Winona would sit beside him during breaks, simply holding his hand while he remained locked in character. The footage survives as legend, him gazing down at her with those wounded, hopeful eyes, her looking up as though he were the only safe harbor she had ever known. They became the gothic romance of the 90s, beat poetry read at 3 a.m, rock albums played until dawn, her fragility wrapped around his rebellion, the tattoo, the ring, the interviews where he called her his soulmate, and she called him everything. Winona's parents adored him at first. They saw how protectively he stood between her and the flashing cameras. Johnny's mother loved how Winona could make him laugh until tears came. Real laughter, the kind that reaches the eyes and stays. Yet whispers began in the industry. Too fast, too young, too exposed. too much. They asked John Waters to officiate the wedding. Waters refused politely but firmly. "She's too young," he said, not out of malice, out of quiet concern. Johnny and Winona laughed it off then. Looking back, perhaps someone was trying to shield her from the undertow already pulling at their feet. Or perhaps they were both so consumed by the feeling that they couldn't see the current dragging them under. Johnny's career accelerated like a locomotive with no brakes in sight, and the early 90s became his forge, each film hammering him into something harder, sharper, more distant from the boy who once fell in love so easily. It started with Crybaby in 1990. John Waters' musical satire cast him as Wade Crybaby Walker, a greaser with a heart too big for his leather jacket. The role was playful, rebellious, dripping with 50s nostalgia, but already the signs were there. Long days on set in Baltimore, endless rehearsals for dance numbers, the constant pull of being the new face Hollywood wanted to own. Johnny threw himself into it, singing, dancing, flashing that dangerous smile. Yet every take pulled him further from quiet evenings with Winona. The film didn't make him a superstar overnight, but it made the industry notice. Here was a leading man who could be both charming and subversive. Offers began arriving faster. Then came Edward Scissorhands itself, 1990, Tim Burton's gothic fairy tale. Johnny is the gentle, tragic creation with scissors for hands, living on the edge of a pastel suburb that feared him. The shoot was intense, isolated, wrapped in Florida's humid strangeness. He spent hours in makeup, blades attached to his fingers, learning to move without harming anyone, including himself. Winona was there too, as Kim, the girl who sees beauty where others see monstrosity. They had moments between takes, quiet, stolen, holding hands while the crew reset lights. But the days were long. Burton's perfectionism meant scenes were shot again and again. Johnny disappeared into the character so completely that emerging from it each night left him drained. The film became a critical darling, a cult classic, but for their relationship, it was the first real taste of how fame could stretch two people thin. The world fell in love with Edward and Kim. Johnny and Winona began to feel the pressure of living up to that fairy tale off-screen. By 1991, the momentum was unstoppable. He signed on to Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, a brief but high-profile cameo as a drug-addicted teenager in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. It was small, but it kept his name circulating. Then came the real shift. What's Eating Gilbert Grape? 1993. Lasse Hallström's tender, heartbreaking drama. Johnny as Gilbert, the 24-year-old man-child holding a crumbling family together in a dying Iowa town. The role demanded everything: exhaustion, tenderness, suppressed rage, quiet despair. He spent months in Texas, living the part, long days on dusty sets, scenes with a developmentally disabled younger brother, Leonardo DiCaprio, in his breakout role, carrying the emotional weight of a man who has forgotten how to dream for himself. The film was intimate, slow, devastating. It earned him his first serious critical acclaim, whispers of Oscar consideration. But the shoot was grueling, 16-hour days, emotional scenes that left him hollowed out. Phone calls home to Winona became shorter. Letters arrived sporadically, written in exhausted handwriting. He was changing, deeper, darker, more committed to roles that mirrored his own growing restlessness. Meanwhile, Winona's star was rising at its own relentless pace. She had already done Beetlejuice and Heathers, films that made her the voice of disaffected youth. But the early 90s brought the avalanche. Mermaids in 1990, opposite Cher and Bob Hoskins, put her on magazine covers as the next big thing. Then came Welcome Home, Roxy Carmichael, 1990, a quirky coming-of-age story that cemented her as the girl who could carry indie charm and mainstream appeal at once. By 1991, she was shooting Bram Stoker's Dracula for Francis Ford Coppola, opposite Gary Oldman, Keanu Reeves, Anthony Hopkins. The production was massive. Elaborate costumes, long nights in London sound stages, the pressure of embodying Mina Harker in a film that was both epic and intimate. She was 19, 20, 21, suddenly the center of a multi-million-dollar machine. Interviews multiplied, photo shoots multiplied. The world wanted her face, her voice, her story. She gave interviews with that quiet intelligence, but the weight was building. Being the it girl meant carrying an entire generation's expectations. Cool, mysterious, untouchable. Every role felt like a referendum on her worth. Distance crept in slowly, insidiously, like ivy climbing a wall. Johnny was in Texas for Gilbert Grape, then bouncing between sets. Winona was in Romania for Dracula, then California, then London again. Time zones turned conversations into messages left on machines. I miss you. I miss you too. Click. Letters that once arrived weekly now came monthly. Pages once filled with poetry and plans, now shorter, sadder, edged with fatigue. He wrote about missing her laugh. She wrote about missing his hands on hers. But the words felt thinner each time. Misunderstandings piled up like unpaid bills. A missed call became proof of indifference. A delayed letter felt like rejection. He was exhausted from emotional scenes that left him raw. She was drained from being the face of a generation that didn't know what it wanted from her. Jealousy flickered. Whispers of who he was seen with on set, who she was photographed beside at premieres. Friends offered advice neither wanted. The world watched and speculated, turning private pain into public entertainment. They tried desperately. Weekend visits squeezed between flights, stolen nights in hotel rooms, promises whispered in the dark. But promises are fragile when two lives are accelerating in opposite direction. He was vanishing into characters darker and more demanding with every role. She was carrying the suffocating weight of being the it girl of the early 90s. Every magazine cover, every interview, every role, another layer of expectation pressing down. By the summer of 1993, after 4 years of lightning strike love, the ivy had strangled the root. No explosive public fight, no photographs of tears or slammed doors. Just a brief joint statement. We have decided to remain friends. The press labeled it amicable. Fans called it devastating. Johnny kept the tattoo. He didn't cover it. He didn't explain it. He simply lived with those 4 words etched beneath his skin like a vow he could not keep. Winona unraveled quietly. Depression settled over her like fog. Sleeping pills became a nightly ritual. One night, she fell asleep with a lit cigarette and woke to burns on her arm, her lowest point, she would later admit. Johnny vanished into work and shadow. Tim Burton, years afterward, said simply, "It's almost like Winona took Johnny's soul with her when she left. He never fully retrieved it." The women who followed were real. They were intense. They were beautiful. And none of them was her. Kate Moss arrived in 1994, a whirlwind of London nights, heroin chic, cigarettes at dawn. They were 2 storms colliding, passionate, destructive, and inevitable. Paparazzi captured them laughing in doorways at 4 in the morning. But chaos has a shelf life. By 1998, it ended in flames, mutual, messy, with no clear villain. Just two people, too alike to survive each other. Johnny called it a hurricane we both walked into willingly. No tattoo, no forever. Only memories that still sting like smoke in the lung. Vanessa Paradis followed in 1998. Paris, quiet, steady, French elegance laced with rock and roll soul. They never married, never needed paper to prove what they shared. 14 years, 2 children, Lily Rose and Jack. A stone house in the south of France he still refers to as home, even now. Vanessa gave him the family he had always craved. Normal mornings, school runs, dinners without cameras flashing through windows. She was the calm after Kate's storm. In interviews, he spoke of her with something close to reverence. She's the mother of my children. She saved me in ways I didn't know I needed saving. They parted in 2012, amicable on the surface, private heartbreak underneath. No public war, no court filings, just two people who loved deeply and then released each other gently. He kept photographs of the children on his phone. He kept calling her family. No tattoo. But those 14 years left a different kind of mark. Gratitude, etched deeper than any needle could reach. And then came Amber Heard, the set of the Rum Diary. Chemistry so thick it felt almost scripted. They married in 2015 on a private island in the Bahamas. A small ceremony, intimate vows, and romantic in the way fairy tales promise. For a brief moment it looked like he had found forever again. However, their blissful union was shattered with alarming speed. By 2016, the marriage was over. She filed for divorce. She faced accusations from both sides, bottles thrown, bruises photographed, text messages leaked. The world watched in real time as passion curdled into war. 2016 līdz 2022. The defamation trial in Virginia became a global spectacle. 6 weeks of live-streamed testimony, audio recordings played on endless loops, screaming, crying, glass shattering, photographs of injuries passed from juror to juror, testimony about drugs, alcohol, violence. The public chose sides as though it were a sporting event. Team Johnny, Team Amber. Twitter timelines turned into battlegrounds. Johnny's career, already battered from Disney's decision to drop him, hung by a thread. Amber's reputation fractured under viral clips and memes. Both bled publicly. Both lost pieces of themselves that may never return. And in the eye of that hurricane, Winona did the one thing almost no one anticipated. April 2022, a letter, not a dramatic courtroom appearance, not a press conference surrounded by flashes, just 24 lines on plain paper. I have known Johnny Depp for over 30 years. We were together from 1989 to 1993. He was never violent toward me. He was never abusive toward me in any way. She described his gentleness, how he stood between her and the paparazzi when she was still 17 and frightened by the constant glare, how he read poetry to her at 3 in the morning until her eyelids grew heavy against his chest, how he made her laugh until tears streamed down her face. She closed with quiet certainty. I can only speak to the man I knew for many years. He was always kind, loving, and protective. The courtroom in Fairfax fell silent when the letter was read aloud. Johnny stared at the defense table, jaw tight, eyes glistening. His attorney paused mid-sentence. Even the jury seemed to lean forward as though hearing something human amid the parade of sworn statements and exhibit numbers. Winona was not present. She had refused to turn her memory into theater. She sent the letter because she believed truth, old truth, 30-year-old truth, still deserved to be heard. Those 24 lines cut through 6 weeks of screaming headlines like glass through flesh. Johnny won on all counts. Defamation, malicious intent. The jury awarded him $15 million, later reduced by agreement. Amber was ordered to pay. The first person he called after the verdict? Winona. Not his daughter Lily Rose, not his son Jack, not his legal team, not his sister, Winona. The conversation lasted more than an hour. No recordings exist. No leaks ever surfaced. No statements were issued to the press. Just two voices that had once promised each other forever, speaking across 3 decades as though time had folded itself back for a fragile, private moment. No one knows the words exchanged. No one ever will. But those close to Johnny say he sounded lighter afterward, like a weight he had carried since the summer of 1993 had finally shifted, even if only by a fraction. Look at the contrast drawn in sharp relief across the years. Kate Moss was fire, beautiful, consuming, and gone in smoke and laughter at 4 a.m. Vanessa Paradis was home, steady, nurturing. 14 years of quiet mornings, children's footsteps on stone floors, dinners lit only by candles. Amber Heard became war, passion twisted into weapon, love turned into evidence, every tender moment dissected and weaponized in courtrooms and headlines. And Winona? Winona was the one name he ever carved forever. Not because it endured the longest, not because it ended cleanly, but because it arrived before the chaos swallowed him, before fame decided who he was permitted to be, before the world turned every private wound into public spectacle. It was the purest love he ever knew, the one that happened when he was still just Johnny, an actor with dreams and a heart that had not yet been broken 1,000 times. At 62, he sits in interviews and speaks her name without flinching. No theatrics, no spin, just truth carried on a tired, tender voice. She was the love of my life. Still is, in a way. Not the romantic kind anymore, but the kind that stays. The kind you carry even when you're not supposed to. He does not ask for her back. He does not hint at reunion. He does not rewrite the ending. He simply admits what the tattoo always understood. Some loves do not end. They only change shape. And sometimes, after every storm, every trial, every lost year, they still answer when you call. That is the part the tabloids never grasped, the part courtrooms could not touch, the part that still breathes quietly beneath blurred ink on his arm. Winona Forever. Not erased, not replaced, just forever.